it one more chance. Hey, where are you, honey? Give it one more chance. Where are you, honey? Give it one more chance.
8 minutes until showtime. 7 minutes until showtime. 6 minutes until showtime. 5 minutes until showtime. 4 minutes until showtime.
5
3 minutes until showtime. 2 minutes until showtime. 1 minute until showtime. 'Your show will go live in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to the show. Good evening, everyone. This is Trucking with Authority. I'm your host, Kenny Long, and for the next hour, consider me your navigator on your journey to success in business, especially the trucking business. We can talk about anything on this show tonight, from getting started as a driver, to buying your first truck, leasing to a carrier, changing to a new carrier, getting your own authority, dealing with the FMCSA and all of the regulations, the record-keeping requirements, the insurance requirements, you name it. We can talk about it here on this show. We can talk about finding freight. That's a big one right now. And of course, the rates have been phenomenal this first quarter. I mean, I don't remember a first quarter like this ever. And I've been in the trucking industry for, over 20 years now. I've never seen it this strong in the first quarter. Today marks the very first official day of spring. Of course, later this week is MATS, the Mid-America Truck Show, is happening. The Mid-America Truck Show, historically for me, has always marked the green flag of the great race. This week, it'll be a little bit of a lull. We have a lot of trucks there in Louisville, just enjoying the show. A lot of trucks have taken this past couple of weeks or months. The first quarter is typically when a lot of people take their time off, because it is typically the slower quarter. Getting their trucks maintained, making some sales calls, getting ready to get out there and hit it hard. And what I've seen is the freight moves after this week. And we may see another level week this week. For the past 4 weeks in a row on the van market, 4 weeks in a row, we've had level rates at $2.14. This time of year, to see a consistent market like that for 4 weeks in a row, and then that was only just a penny drop the week before that and 2 pennies the week before that. So, I mean, it has been very consistent, down from a spike in January. But it has been, an amazing, strong first quarter, which is a very good thing. Now, that's vans. We've seen flatbeds in the first quarter holding strong and making increases in the first quarter through the wintertime. Now, the wintertime is the slowest period for all segments, but flatbed takes the hardest hit. Typically, that's the one and only time of year when you sometimes see van rates exceed flatbed rates, and it didn't happen. Flatbed rates have been extremely strong, and there are a lot of contributing factors to that. Reefer rates have been setting records. Now, all three segments are record setting right now, because for the past 2 years in a row, if you throw out this year, this first quarter, if you throw out January and February, all of 2015, 2016, we did not see rates like this at all. It's record setting. It's a phenomenal market. Now, to go into the market right now, I remember in 2014, rates on the van segment, and that for me, the vans are kind of the marker of all of the other segments, because van is the general freight of the industry, so to speak. And I've noticed that the vans typically in the first quarter drop, and 2014 we were watching them bounce pretty steadily above $2 per mile, and it was late 2014, early 2015 was the first time we saw them drop below $2 a mile for that entire straight year. And it was a little scary. And we saw them continue to drop. They got down to what I would consider just barely over operating cost. And I believe all of the segments got just to barely over operating cost. There were very little differences between the three segments. And it continued like that for most of 2015 and 2016. Now, I say that because in 2014, there was a lot of attitude toward shippers and receivers and towards brokers and towards the sources of freight to really rake those people over the coals, to take advantage of them and get every penny out of them. I remember people just literally on the phone and trying to, and it wasn't even a negotiation. They were demanding their rates. And at the time, they were getting their rates. But I promise you, a lot of those carriers had a big red flag next to their name in 2015 and 16 when it was just at operating cost. The brokers were getting their money back. I can assure you of that. Except for the carriers that built relationships. Now, I had a show a week or two ago where I talked about this and how important relationships are. Extremely important to have those relationships and to know who your customer is. This is something that came up this week. To actually know who you need to build the strong relationship with and to understand who your customers are. I think there's a lot of people out there that don't even understand exactly who they should be focusing their efforts on. And I want to talk about that a little bit tonight as well. We are streaming live again tonight, as always, on Blog Talk Radio. Call the number at the bottom of your screen. If you're watching the video while you're driving, please shut it off. Call the number 917-889-9924. You can listen live through the phone. You can call in. You can press 1 if you want to chime in, add your questions or comments. You don't automatically come on live. It's not just an open conference line. Elizabeth is in the other room screening calls. So this works just like a regular call-in radio show. If you haven't joined us before, press 1. She will get your name and your question. Don't be shy. Believe me, there's nothing to worry about. We won't put you under the bus. I won't argue with you. I will give you your piece. I won't hang up on you. And I don't censor the calls. I do ask that you mind your language, but I don't censor the calls for anything other than that type of stuff. If you don't agree with me, I welcome you to come on the air. So call the number at the bottom of your screen, 917-889-9924. Pulling up the switchboard now, and let's see who we've got on there. We are also streaming live on Facebook. Just about every group out there, we've got the show posted, but the main group is the Trucking with Authority group. There's also a Trucking with Authority page where you can find all of the past recorded shows. We're also streaming live simultaneously on YouTube, so check us out, the Trucking with Authority YouTube channel. All of these groups are good places to find more information. If you don't get your questions on the air here, if you don't get your questions answered, you don't get your comments put in, if you want to, just go ahead and add it to social media. If you're afraid to come on the air, which I know a lot of people are, then get your questions out there on social media, on YouTube or on Facebook, and I will eventually get those either answered or I will make them topics of the show. Some of that spurred some of tonight's show, actually, and that is building relationships, but understanding who to build a relationship with, adding value to earn the trust and loyalty of customers, and now is a fantastic time to do that. Now, I was telling you that in 2014, everybody was taking advantage of the great rates, and I'm not discouraging you from taking advantage of the great rates. They are out there. Supply and demand is in our favor as carriers. Make the money, make hay while the sun shines. But remember that saying, make hay while the sun shines means it will get dark sometime soon. It may be a year, maybe 2 years. I tend to think that this upward trend will hang out a little longer than in years past. So we may get 2 years or so out of this before they level out and plateau. That being said, it could be next month, it could be 6 months, could be a year or 2 years. Sometime in the future, the rates will level out or dip. They may actually get down to the point where they're just above operating costs again. Are you prepared for that? What are you doing to prepare for that? Now, I kind of threw out some warnings on a previous show about don't go out and buy a brand new Harley right now because rates are good. Don't buy a new bass boat, upgrade and move into a $500,000 home because you're just bringing in huge settlement checks right now. Don't buy a new Cadillac. Don't buy your wife a new Mercedes. Be very careful to spend your money wisely. Make sure you're maintaining yourself on a very strict budget. Now, I know there are a lot of people out there that calculate their own pay by what their home expenses are, which is an okay way to manage things if you've got your home expenses under control. I had this discussion with one of my drivers the other day. He's the top grossing driver in our fleet. He does a fantastic job, and he knows his numbers so well that when he negotiates, he's extremely confident about it. He likes to know what his numbers are by calculating his home expenses. He knows what his mortgage payment is. He knows what his truck payment, his trailer payment is. Calculates all of his home personal bills, car payments, everything that he has at the house. Calculates all of that, figures out what he needs to make on the truck to take that home to pay the bills. If you have your home expenses under control and you're on a budget at home, that's an okay way to do it. What I fear is that people that do that don't necessarily have their home expenses under control. Now, if you think that you can go out and buy a $500,000 house and you can buy that new bass boat and a new Harley and 2 or 3 new cars and whatever it is, because you're sitting pretty right now because the rates are fantastic, you will be visiting with some attorneys in the future to figure out who gets to take your stuff. You'll probably get to know some repo guys. The more cars you buy, the better you will get to know those people. They will be coming on your property to take everything you own if you're not careful right now. So heed that warning. If you're in that situation, I would suggest you work this problem backwards. I suggest that you figure out what a reasonable driver pay would be, salary, mileage base, whatever it is. You see these trailers out on the road that say 50 cents a mile, come work for us, right? That's a good number to start with, 50 cents per mile. If you're an owner operator and in this market you pay yourself 50 cents per mile, you do all your bookkeeping properly, and you budget your home expenses to work within that, and still with that put money aside, not money above and beyond that 50 cents per mile, but a chunk of that 50 cents per mile, be able to still put that aside, you'll probably be able to survive when this market turns around. So be careful and make sure you don't live beyond your means. Again, we are streaming live on all 3 platforms. We are on Blog Talk Radio. Call the number at the bottom of your screen, 917-889-9924. If you're on the phone lines, and we've got several people on, if you're on the phones, go ahead and press number 1 on your keypad, and that will raise your hand. Looks like we have several people in the phone room now. Press 1 on your keypad. That'll get your questions in the air. We're also streaming live on YouTube and Facebook. Make sure you check us out. If you're listening to one of the recorded shows, you can find the recorded shows at truckingwithauthorityshow.com, so check that out. I want to make sure we get everybody in here that wants to join us tonight. So my warning is out of the way. I want to talk about those relationships again and building the relationships with the right people. Identify who your customer is. I think before you go out and build a bunch of relationships, you need to identify who it is you're building relationships with so you understand the return you'll get on that investment. Now, when I say investment, I don't mean monetary investment, but the time and commitment that you put into building that relationship. It's not worth spending a lot of time and effort to go outside of your normal safe comfort zone to build a relationship with somebody that can never benefit you, never help you, can't even network you with the right people that can help you. And there are a lot of people out there that do that. Or build a relationship with somebody that you think might be your customer, but ultimately is not. At the end of the day, recognize where your value is best served. So two questions I'd like to ask, and those of you that are on the phone lines, please respond, or if you're streaming here on one of the social media channels here, please respond to this. Who is your customer if you are a company driver? Who is your customer if you are an owner-operator leased to a carrier? Who is your customer if you are an independent owner-operators with working with brokers or direct shippers? And if you have drivers or if you have owner-operators, what is the relationship between all of those people? Where can you add value in any of those relationships that could turn around and benefit you more? Where are you wasting time in some cases trying to add that value? If you're on the phones, go ahead and press 1. I'd like to hear some comments on that. We had a bit of a discussion earlier this week. I was going back and forth with another social media friend of mine here. We were going back and forth about, it's really just semantics, about who the employer is on certain job statuses, so to speak. So my other question is, once you identify your employer, what is the most valuable thing, the most value that you can do, the most valuable thing you can do for your customer? On the flip side of that, what is the most worthless, common, mundane task that you do that has the least amount of added value to your customer? Those are two questions in one, I suppose. What do you do and what can you do to add value? And what do you do now that doesn't really add any value? What are those two things? So who is your customer exactly? How can you add value for your customer? And what do you do that really doesn't add value to the customer? It's just part of the job. And we have a couple callers in the waiting room now. I'll let Elizabeth screen the calls, and I'll get back to that. So while you all are stewing on those questions, let me talk about some of the general broad things that you can do to add value, to build a relationship. One of those is to be authentic and honest, even if it makes you look horrible. If you screw up, own it. Don't try to lie about it. Don't try to skirt the truth and, or try to hide anything. Be honest, even if it gets you in some trouble, in some hot water, because this is business. And trust and loyalty in business goes a long, long way. The only way to earn that trust and loyalty is to be honest. The next thing you can do is identify your shared values and goals. Identify, and I talk about this when I do my negotiation presentation. Identify the problems that you are trying to solve together. Identify what you can do to mutually benefit each other and reach the end goal together. And in some cases, that might mean sitting down with this potential customer, client, whatever you want to call this person, or this company, this entity, and just having a brainstorming session. I like to listen to Elizabeth talk on the phone when she's trying to solve problems for customers, because it's really interesting the way she does it. And some of it is just her attitude of just not letting things go. And that can be a double-edged sword sometimes, but she will stew on problems. We've had brokers and carriers both call us trying to get some unique situation solved, and where most people would wash their hands of it. And, I like to think that I go above and beyond, and I will throw out some possible solutions, and I'll try to do certain things. She will take that to an extreme. Even to the point where she will, recommend other people to do the job. She will give them advice. She will explain to them, try to help them better understand the problem. And sometimes, I don't feel like comfortable doing that, because there are times when I think they came to me with the problem. They should understand it. They should be helping me understand it better. But there have been several times I can think of where she has gone back, discussed the problem with the potential customer, and came up with a mutual solution that was completely outside of the box thinking. And I hate that term now, but outside of the box thinking, because they brainstormed on it together. For example, a broker might just be thinking, well, I just got to find the right carrier. I'm going to call all day. I'm going to call thousands of numbers until I get the right carrier that can move this load. Well, she will stew on it, and it'll be, weird hours, or strange loading dock situation, or no loading dock at all, or, trailers in unique locations dropped in a corner, backed in behind something else, or whatever it is. And Elizabeth will lose sleep over it. And she will call them back and say, well, what if you find another carrier that could do this? Or you find a truck that could do that, or whatever it is. She'll come up with solutions and proposals to try to solve that problem, even if she knows at some point she's not going to be the person that at the end of the day gets the load or solves it. She just wants to be the problem solver. And it's a really cool thing, because once you do that for a customer, they never forget you. You have added value that is unequivocal. I mean, nobody will forget that. We didn't even do the load for some of these people. We solved their problem for them. I remember there was a time last year when Hurricane Irma was coming through the Central Florida area. It was going to hit the Florida Keys extremely hard, and everybody in the states had evacuated. They had turned the shoulders of I-75 and I-95 into northbound lanes, and everybody was leaving, but there was, people that lived in the Keys still needed to try to board up if they could. So we had some brokers call us that needed some plywood, flatbed loads, or step deck loads moved into the Florida Keys right in the middle of an evacuation. Now that's a problem to try to overcome. And we helped them. Now, we didn't do it. I didn't have a truck in the area. We couldn't do it ourselves, but we helped them find a truck. I gave them the solution. I didn't try to co-broker it or double broker it or try to make money off the top. This was a, dire needs emergency situation, and we gave them a carrier that we knew could make it happen. They didn't forget that. We got several loads from them after the fact, and they paid well and they took care of us. Those types of out-of-the-box thinking, that problem solving, is one of the brainstorming type sessions that you can do that will help add value. Now, develop a mutual respect with them. Now, one of the things, again, I talked about in 2014, everybody was raking the brokers and the shippers and things over the coals, trying to take every penny they had, right? And even today, I made a post on my group, the Trucking Rates and Lanes group, and about how the rates have been steady throughout the first quarter. And, I posted the DAT trend lines report on there. And somebody made a comment about how brokers are the enemy of owner-operators. They have complete opposite interests of what owner-operators are trying to do. And they are united against owner-operators to make sure that we suffer, essentially. That type of thought process is not going to build a relationship with somebody that will carry you through the downturn next year or the year after. If you treat somebody like they're your enemy, if you treat somebody as if they are going to take advantage of you every chance you get, which is, I think, the terminology he used, they just want to take advantage of you. I think that's a complete disrespectful attitude for somebody that's really has the same goal in mind. You're both trying to earn a profit off of moving a load from A to B. How can we get the load moved from A to B and we both make as much money as possible? Obviously, we have our own self-interest involved. We want to make as much for ourselves as we can, but there are so many people out there that have this win-lose negotiation style where they have to win, the other party loses, that's the only way to do it, that it burns a lot of bridges. It really does. Now, I'm going to throw this out there. 2014, those of you that are in the Rate Per Mile Masters group, headed up by Chad Boblet. In 2014, Chad and I used to talk a lot. We're not on the best of terms anymore, but his attitude was, take every penny you can from the brokers. He had this attitude that I'm describing right now. In 2015, when things turned around, he realized where that was a problem. And in fact, wrote articles about how the relationships that he built are what carried him. He was anti-relationship through and through in early 2014. But when he saw that rates could drop and rates could turn around, he came around, and there are articles written about this, about how his relationships with certain brokers saved him. And that's really what it takes, because this market will turn around. It absolutely, it won't last forever. All right, so I threw a couple questions out there, and we have a couple of comments about that. So let me take these comments, and we'll come back to this. We're going to go to Anthony in Florida. Anthony, what's on your mind? Welcome to the show. Have you got any answers for these questions?
Well, as far as adding value, I think a direct line of communication, as you were saying before, being honest and communicate to them what's going on, what's the problem, and how you may have even solved the problem even before letting them know. It could be something as simple as a breakdown, or maybe there's damaged product, that some people will just throw off to the shoulder, and say, well, they don't need to worry about that one case, or you break down and you're late, and or maybe you were involved in an accident and that held you up. It's all about the integrity of you that you're representing. So, like, I drive under Shane's authority, with Green Miles, and he's built a model of superior customer service, and there's some relationships that work out really well, some that don't. But taking in consideration, last week, I'll give an example of last week with myself, that it was a new setup that we had, and I was going from Iowa to Phoenix. There's supposed to be additional stop, and I get the bills from the shipper, and I make sure I communicate with the broker what's going on. So I get the bills. The bill said we're only going to Phoenix, and I let them know that in an email. And I had gotten a phone call from Nighttime Dispatch. I'd let them know that as well through a voicemail message, because I couldn't get a hold of anybody there. And then the next morning they call to get an update, and I went ahead and told them again, this only has one stop. And he's like, oh, well, if I would have known that, I could have got a cheaper price. And I made my comments. Well, I don't think so. And so we get out to Phoenix, go to deliver, and he calls me about an hour before I get to Phoenix, and he says, yeah, you were supposed to make that one stop in Albuquerque. I said, oh, okay. Well, I let you know through email and everything that shipper, and I gave the shipper's name, who it was, and said, well, this is what they said. So you want me to go back to Albuquerque? Like, yeah, how much will that cost us? Well, I gave him a price, and he said it was too steep. And I said, well, I really didn't want to end up in Albuquerque. It's my final point, to get a reload, and I have to deadhead out to Texas to get another load. But I'll get it there as soon as possible for you. So I delivered the next day. I get it, and you could really feel how irritated he was, because he had to pay that large amount of money. And my thought process was like, well, we're probably not going to hear back from them. Well, long and behold, don't you know, I posted my truck today, and he called me up, same broker. Hey, I got this load headed down to Texas. Can you get there on time? It's very important that we get there on time. I said, I'll make it there on time. I said, but I need to get a washout, and that may hold me up. So he problem solved the issue. And I mean, brokers will work with you if you're upfront and honest about the situation, And he called me back and said, well, he goes, we're in good luck. Where you're picking up, they can do a washout right there. So just go ahead and head in right in there. I said, great. So I got there on time and picked up. Now I'm headed down to Texas. And he seems very satisfied, because I was upfront and honest with him what the situation was going to be if I had to get this trailer washout outside of that shipper. And I think that's one thing that these brokers really do care about, is you being upfront and honest before you take that load. Look, this is my situation. I can do this for you, but I might fall behind. And I think with them knowing that, they'll end up working with you instead of being in a pissy mood per se.
And it comes,
because you're late.
It comes down to,
and it goes back to their customer.
Don't promise more than you can deliver, and then do what you say you will do. Say what you'll do and do what you'll say. And,
exactly.
It's just honesty and transparency. And most brokers understand what we're faced with. Most brokers understand the ELD issues and the hours of service issues. And most brokers understand that you need washouts and travel time and, different things like that, if you're upfront and explain it to them. But if you booked a load and you said, yeah, I'll be there by 2, knowing full well that, you got to go get a washout and it's, 100 miles away and, you'll probably be there around 3, but you don't want to tell him that because he might not give you the load. 2 o'clock comes when you're not at the shipper yet. He's going to be calling, wondering what's going on. Oh, well, now I'm going to tell him I have to get a washout and all this. Well, you didn't tell me that up front. If you would have told me that up front, we could have figured things out with you. You know, and it's kind of transparency, honesty. It builds trust and loyalty. And even if there are unique circumstances like your trip back to Albuquerque, they understand, and you're not trying to take advantage of them. But it's all a lot of that emotional negotiation where you told me you could tell he was a little upset that he had to pay you so much. Some of that is really just a negotiation tactic where they want to try to play on your feelings and hope that the next time around, maybe you took him for that money this time, but the next time around you'll feel bad for him and maybe you'll save him a few bucks here or there. But that's all negotiation. Now you just got to remember that this stuff is business. He obviously didn't feel any kind of way about it because he called you back for the next load. If he thought you were taking advantage of him, he probably never would have called you again. So yeah, absolutely. That and the communication is what I would say the most valuable thing that we have to offer as drivers out on the road. The most valuable. Now let me change my question around a little bit because you're somewhat answering what I'm getting at anyway. You're working with the broker and you're leased to Green Miles. Who would you say is your customer?
Correct. My customer is the shipper / broker.
And why do you say that?
Because I book my own loads. Well,
Okay.
I book my own loads.
Okay.
Okay, and Shane does a lot of the back office stuff. I'm representing Green Miles.
Okay.
But my direct customer will be that particular broker. I'm going to be in direct communication with them. And of course, the customer as well is who hired the broker is going to be the shipper. And having a good attitude and when you go in to pick up that load plays a big important part because anytime you sign in, you're putting your carrier's name and who you are on there, and they'll remember you.
Okay. Now, try to figure out how to phrase this. I'm going to take you for a ride here. So, you know, I hope you have some thick skin. I don't want to throw you under the bus, but I just want you. This is just to help people think outside of the box a little bit, to gain a little perspective on some things. Okay. When that shipper writes you the check, what do you do with it?
Well, the check doesn't go directly to me; it goes to Shane.
Okay, so who pays you?
Shane pays me.
So the shipper is your customer, but somebody else pays you.
I get where you're coming at.
Yeah. So that's where I wanted to go with that because
Right.
when you are building this relationship with the shipper or the broker and you're trying to do that, and you did say it, you are representing Green Miles. You are representing the carrier that you are leased to, which is good. That's phenomenal. When you do that, you are building a relationship with the shipper and with the broker, but who is that directly benefiting? Now,
Green Miles.
they will call you, of course, but Green Miles has a number of other trucks leased on as well. Will they call Green Miles or will they call you?
They will call Green Miles.
Exactly.
Then
So-
that's when
So your efforts, and I applaud you, and you know, an owner-operator that goes out of the way to build the relationships representing the carrier they're leased to, and I have owner-operators leased onto me that are doing the same thing, and they're fantastic, and I truly appreciate it. But is there other things that you can do? Now, you are building your relationship with Green Miles by making sure that they provide the proper service and the best service possible to their customer, right? Because it's ultimately that shipper or that broker is the customer of Green Miles. Okay,
Correct.
so you're doing the best, and that's adding value. Is there something else that you could do to add value that Shane would recognize that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with hauling a load or working with a broker? What else could you do to benefit him, to benefit just Green Miles, to
Well,
improve that relationship?
Well, there has been some times where a broker has called me and had asked if I was in a certain area, and me knowing and talking to the other drivers here at Green Mile, knowing what area they're in, and we pretty much say when we're going to deliver something, we're looking out for each other.
Right.
And so if somebody calls me and says, hey, I got a load in this area, okay, hey, you know what? I can't help you, but here's a number. Call this guy here. He's probably within 100 miles of there, and give him a call and see if he's available. Because I say, I know he's delivering near that area.
Awesome.
You know, and knowing, you know, where certain people are and having that communication within the business itself, within Green Miles, I think helps with the brokers trying to get contact with our services.
There you go. Now, that is improving your relationship and adding value to Green Miles. You won't get a paycheck, so to speak, a settlement off of that extra work directly, but you are building that relationship with your customer. Your customer, in turn, might make some money off of that because one of the other trucks that are leased on are under that, are going to go haul that load, and the customer will. You may or may not get a kickback from that, but you're not going to get anything directly out of it. So, you know, that type of thing adds value to your customer. That's the type of stuff that I think everybody should try to pay more attention to. Add value to your direct customer, which is, if you're an owner operator, that is the carrier that you are leased to. So I want to take that a little further. Do you consider yourself an employee of Green Miles, or do you consider yourself, do you own a business and they are your customer?
I own a business and they are my customer.
Okay. And I agree with that. Now, the discussion I was having in one of these Facebook groups was, they said that you get a weekly check, you are employed by them, and they are your employer. And I completely disagree with that, because as an employer, they would essentially be able to tell you how to do everything in your day-to-day operations. At any given time, you could tell Green Miles that I'm leaving and I'm going to go lease to Patriot Star. And you could do that tomorrow. I could have you over here with our logos on, and you know, we could do that in a day. And I'm just your next customer. It's important to understand that you could fire your customer if they're not taking advantage of, or taking care of you, just like they could essentially find somebody else. Now, a carrier leases owner-operators to add capacity. They lease an owner-operator. They pay the truck. They don't pay the driver. That's one thing with my TMS systems that I've been shopping for. All of them want to pay the driver. And I said, I don't pay the driver. I pay the truck. I had one guy say that, oh, well, the truck can't cash the check. Yeah, but the owner of the truck is not always the driver. I have one truck that's leased on to me that had 3 separate drivers in it last year. And when it came time to run the 1099s, I don't want to add up the settlements from the 3 drivers. I need one yearly settlement for the truck. That's all I need. So they're leasing equipment to add it. Now, it's not any different than if we were to go to Penske or Ryder and lease a truck, and then go to one of these third-party companies like ProDriver or some of these others that have a temp driver service. You're just leasing a truck with a driver. The relationship between a carrier and an owner-operator is just that, a customer to a business. And it's the same the other way around. So understanding that helps you to think on how you can add value, to understand the exact role that you play. So I'll go ahead and, do you have any other thoughts on that, Anthony?
No, not at this time.
and I didn't mean to, and I appreciate it. I didn't mean to throw you under the bus there. I'm going to go ahead and put you back on hold. I do have a couple other calls. But that was the exact discussion that we were having. Somebody said that, you know, when you are leased to a carrier, they are your employer. But understand that there is no difference. If I lease on an owner-operator, no difference than if I go lease a truck from Penske or Ryder. I have to add the truck to my insurance. I have to add a driver to my list. Doesn't matter. It could be a third-party, pro driver temp service. I still have to add them to my driver files. I still have to do all of that work just because those are the regulations. But the monetary transaction is no different. And it's really no different between a carrier working for a broker, even though it might be a once and done situation. At the end of the day, there is an onboarding process that most carriers go through because FMCSA has all of these safety regulations. You have to add the truck and the driver to your insurance. You have to go through the driver drug testing program. You have to go through all of these different things. But at the end of the day, a driver could technically have a dry erase marker and write the name of the carrier that they're working for today on their door and hit the road with a new carrier every single day if they so chose. They'd have to take a drug test every day for the carrier they'll be working for tomorrow, but they could do that because it's just the customer. Now, granted, I understand the long-term partnership and relationship. I call our owner-operators, we call them pros. Partnered resource operators. They are partners in business. Just like Anthony was saying about his relationship with Green Miles. He would help the company and help the other owner operators because they're building a partnership. They have these mutual goals that they're trying to meet. They have a beneficial relationship together. They have a partnership. But it's not really legally a partnership. They really have a customer business relationship. So just something to kind of change your perspective on that whole transaction. Think outside of the box. I even go so far as to say, when I am mentoring and coaching people that are owner-operator, or rather company drivers working directly for a carrier, to have that same mentality. Everybody, and it doesn't even have to be in the trucking industry, everybody in the world that works for somebody, you are trading something of value for something else of value. In most cases, money. But there are people that work for room and board and work for food and work for different things. But you're trading value for value. And your labor for dollars, or your truck and your expenses in return for more dollars, whatever it is in the relationship, you're value for value. Even employees working at McDonald's, I like to help them understand. We met in St. Petersburg last year, we met a college graduate who was starting up her own business, and she was working at a fast food place. But she had that entrepreneur mindset. And she couldn't stand working for someplace because the people she worked with had the employee mindset. And I said, look, go in there as an employee with the entrepreneur mindset. What can you do to add value to the company as if they were your customer? And she started to do that. And quickly she made it to the shift supervisor and then the manager, and then she ended up starting her own business like she wanted to do. But I mean, she was quickly moving up the ranks because she stopped thinking about, I just have to punch in and do my job and go punch out and go home. She started thinking about, this is my customer and I have to provide value to my customer. I'm going to go in and I'm going to do everything I can. The way you get paid, the tax form that you get at the end of the year, the W-2 or the 1099, or if you punch in and punch out, or you fill out a logbook, or you fill, whatever it is, all that stuff is paperwork. None of that matters. Your actual motions that you go through, when you go in and you treat them like a customer and you add value, that is where you will succeed and advance in life. In every level of life. Whatever you're doing, add value to the person that is exchanging. And it doesn't even have to be an employer. Let me make sure I back this all the way up. It doesn't even have to be an employer. If you are in a negotiation with somebody, add value. You add value as if they are your customer, you will get value back. Always do that. I always think of, especially people that have that entrepreneurial spirit. If you can think that way, everybody you encounter is your customer because they all have something of value to give you in return. Forget about the tax forms and the paychecks and the stubs and the accountants and the everything else. All that stuff is just paperwork shuffle. Who cares? That's just regulations and the way they say that you have to be done just so somebody else can take responsibility for this or that. Who cares? None of that matters. What matters is that you do the best job that you possibly can to provide service for your customer. That builds trust and loyalty and relationships. Develops a mutual respect for the other person. If you go in and you are talking about how brokers are your natural enemy of the owner-operators and that all they want to do is take advantage of you, if that is your mindset when you go into it, you won't get the most value back out of it. You are not adding value. You're going in there thinking that you're going to lose. You're going in thinking that you're in a battle, and you're not in a battle. You are both trying to meet mutual terms. Always. Every transaction that you are in, you're both trying to meet mutual terms. Sometimes it can't be done. My driver, Jason, talks about how he has to make sometimes 60 or more phone calls every time he books a load, because it might be 60 or more times that they can't solve the problem together. It's not a good mutual relationship. They can't, it just doesn't work. But there are customers out there that you can. You know, other things you can do to add value is make sure that you have clean equipment. And, you know, my driver, Dave, right now, he's getting ready. He's going to Matt's. One of the things he offered to do for us is, obviously, we have the You Drive You company, and he is very supportive of helping us grow Patriot Star, and he's very supportive of You Drive You and the next event we'll be putting on. And he offered to let us, you know, label up and put, you know, wrap his truck or put stickers on his truck with our logos and things, because he is allowing us to do that to add value for us. He has the YouTube channel. For those of you that listen to me or want to find him, it's Columbia Glider Dave. He's got the YouTube channel. He talks about his numbers. He talks about the success that he's had under Patriot Star. He talks about his relationships with the other drivers. We have an internal load board. Now, this is how you know that they're adding value only to us. They're only adding value in-house to their direct customer, because nobody else sees this stuff. Everybody sees his YouTube channel. And, of course, he's advertising for us. It ends up being free advertisement and everything, and I thank him for that. And, you know, we have an internal Facebook group, and he participates in conversations over there. And Jason, you know, every day puts out something of what do you do to add value. What Jason's thing today was one of the things that spun off tonight's show is, how are you preparing for the future, preparing for a potential downturn? What do you do? All of these things are, you know, he's adding value. He doesn't even work for the show. He added value to the company. He added value to me, to this show. He's adding value, and he's not getting anything, you know, direct returns. I just talked to him last night, and I gave him all kinds of accolades on the phone. I told him how fantastic that was, you know, and he will be recognized for that at some point. You know, he's already the top earner in the company, and he is sharing the wealth with everyone. He's bringing the rates up of everybody else that he talks to. So it's fantastic. And in turn, that's helping him, because that's, you know, kind of raising the average expectations that people, the brokers and customers have for the Fleet Patriot Star. It's all a big cyclical relationship, and it all helps. Every bit of it helps, adds value. All right, so have more phone calls. Let's go to these. We're going to go to Glenn in Minnesota. Glenn, there we go. Glenn, welcome to the show.
Hey, Kenny. I've been watching called. Your comment about communication being the value added, that's definitely true, because I have a reefer trailer, and, you know, anyone who has a reefer trailer and has tanker endorsement can haul any load I haul, and my tanker endorsement loads are fairly rare. But my most common broker to get up on.
Glenn. Sounds like we might be. Oh, and he dropped off. Sorry about that, Glenn. If you can give us a call back. I left him on hold this whole time, and I finally bring him on, and we lost him. So, Glenn, you know, feel free to call back on. We're getting towards the top of the hour. I actually have some very close friends in town today, so I'm going to cut this off promptly at 8 o'clock tonight. But let me get to some of these other comments and questions and finish up my list of notes here. The mutual respect thing, we touched on that. Share some vulnerability. Like Anthony was saying, you know, you can't be perfect. If you go into a negotiation or you're trying to build a relationship and you overpromise and underdeliver, you're telling them you're perfect. You don't have any reason that you can't do something. Share that. Tell them what you can't do. Tell them where, you need to go home. I have, my wife is sick at home, or I need to be at a certain place. Share that with them. They know you're not perfect. Share with them that you can't do a load. Our new driver, Russ, was just talking to me this morning about how his Japanese no on something was, he doesn't want to go back that way because, he needs to be back in Texas at a certain time. He doesn't want to do that. So his no is, I'll do it for $5,000 on 800 miles. That's his no. He would have done it for that. He gave him an option, but he explained that he has to be at a certain place for a certain reason. They understand. He didn't want to just say no, but he gave them the vulnerability and explained where his situation was. Help your customers. I've got your back attitude. Help them feel that they can trust you to do the right thing at the right time. If, it hits the fan, be there for them. When they had, in our situation, we had just 2 weeks ago, or last week, we had a shipment that was in New Orleans, had to move to Grapevine, Texas, had a truck that was in Houston, and he did what it took to get there to cover that for us. We ended up covering it another way, and he was able to go do something else more profitable. He was willing to make that sacrifice because he was just, he was taking one for the team, so to speak, but he had our back. He was going to make sure that we took care of that customer because he knows how important it is. And in return, we made sure that we kept fighting to find somebody else to cover it. It was a small LTL load. We didn't have truckload rates on it, but he was willing to do what he had to do to make sure it got covered. So, Dave Clem, excuse me. I want to thank him for that. So I'm learning a lot just from the owner-operators here at Patriot Star as well. So I'm learning every day as we go, and the trust and loyalty that is developing in my own fleet, I'm starting to see how beneficial that is just within our own group and outside of that as well. Get more personal is another one. And I've got this list of, the top 10 things that you do to build relationships. Get more personal. If you're a carrier and you're trying to build a relationship with a broker, I understand that the once and done transactions are typically done over the phone, but most carriers do several transactions with brokers that they work with. If you have an agent or a rep that you work with on a regular basis, go meet them in person. Last year, when we went to the truck show, we drove, and it wasn't Matt's. I don't even remember what event it was. We drove up to the other side of Nashville. And when we were passing through Nashville, we stopped and saw one of our biggest customer brokers at the time. We walked in. They were thrilled to see us. They introduced us to, everybody that they worked with. They introduced us to their higher ups, their supervisors, and, we took pictures with them. It was fantastic. Very few people do that. They remember us. We built that relationship. That particular agent has moved on to another brokerage now. We still work with that first brokerage. We still work with that agent. He works with somebody else. He took that relationship with him over there too. So now we have multiple people we work with because we went to visit in person. He wouldn't have cared. We'd have just been another number on the phone. But he knows us personally because we went to see him. I'm not saying you have to go out of your way for it. I'm not saying to make a huge financial dump into making these little relationships happen, but it doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt to do the little things. Dave Casanova is watching here. He's the Columbia glider Dave I was talking about. He's the one that, he went to a job site and he bought pizza for the crew. And he established that relationship, through the customer, through the shipper and the receiver, which got back to the broker, which got back to me, and he built that relationship. It's on a dedicated run. He did that by doing something that they would remember him for. So do something to make that meaningful connection. Also, try to offer something of value before you try to get something back. That's something that in this market, that's where a lot of people make a mistake. They get that phone call for that hot load that's got to move right now. They throw out their number that's just crazy high numbers. They know it's going to be a once and done type thing. They hang up the phone. They get their number, they get their rate con, whatever, and they go do the load, and they hang up the phone, never try to talk to them again. They don't want to build that relationship, once and done. Build a relationship and offer something of value in return. You're going to do the load for them. They're willing to pay you this rate. Go above and beyond. Do extra, communication. Take pictures of everything. Do an extremely great, fantastic job so they remember you. Do that without them asking. A lot of times a broker, I'm blown away by this, when a broker on the rate confirmation has to write, that there's fines if there's not check calls and phone calls, or if you don't use MacroPoint or whatever, stupid little stuff like that. That to me, they want to fine carriers, because there are carriers and drivers out there that refuse to do these things, refuse to do the simple stuff, to the point that brokers have to fine them for it. And in my opinion, it should be something they don't even have to ask for. All of our owner-operators do all of these things on their own. I didn't have to ask them for it. They just do it because it's the right thing to do. So building that relationship by giving something of value without being asked is a huge way to go. And then let go of expectations as well. Don't go in, expecting them to bend over backwards because you might have scratched their back. They'll remember you. Don't ever, it's the same kind of thought process of don't ever loan money to somebody unless you don't expect them to pay it back. Or unless you, I missed that all up, but you get what I'm saying. Give people stuff. Don't expect people to pay you back for it. Don't have those expectations. So with that, we do have another call, and I'm not sure if that was Glenn calling back, but Elizabeth hasn't screened it yet. I'm going to go ahead and take this call from the 803 area code. 803 area code. I know you haven't been screened yet, but I'm going to go bring you on the air because we are at the top of the hour. 803, are you there?
Pretty good. How you doing, Kenny?
Fantastic. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
I'm Ben Duke from Sumter, South Carolina.
Oh, okay. So, Ben, you are the one that we were discussing this with about employer-employee partnership relationship.
I don't know anything about the employee-employee part or employer part, but I was the one with the partnership with the carrier. I think you got confused with somebody else's comment or statement in the post that we were having a discussion on.
Right. And to summarize that, and pay no attention to the English lady, she's about to tell us that the show's over. But to summarize that, his comment was that a contractor, an owner-operator leased to a carrier, is an employee of that company. And I started the comment by saying they're not an employee. If you're an owner-operator, you run a business, and that carrier is your customer. Now, you took that further and said the carrier is a partner, which I somewhat agree with. Like I said, we call our owner-operators pros, partnered resource operators. So I somewhat agree with that. But at the same time, I would also say that brokers that I work with, I'm a partner with them as well. For anybody, I'm trying to solve that mutual problem. And every customer I have, for the duration of the transaction, for the time frame that I'm working with them to solve the problem of getting that freight moved, we have partnered to do that. Now, you think it's more than that?
Yes. Let me, I know you're in a hurry. Let me break down my point of view real quick. In my opinion, the owner-operator is leased to the carrier for their back office services and the U.S. DOT number and their signing of the rate cons and stuff. Because normally in my operation that I'm in, and I don't really venture out past that, I don't get to sign the rate con. My deal and contract is with the carrier is with the broker. So in my opinion, it's a partnership where they make the signing the paperwork and stuff, and I have the equipment and they have the authority and whatnot. The broker to the carrier is a separate contract. As you said earlier, they can get any truck that the carrier has if they want to go through the carrier, but I'm the one that is looking at the load or finding the load or whatnot.
Okay.
Anything that I do out here, CSA inspections, fuel, you can, I'm sure, think of a slew of other things that the carrier can do that directly affects the business or operation of the carrier from the owner operator, as well as the carrier has several things that they can do that would affect the owner operator. Let's say they fail a DOT audit, or I don't know, maybe some type of financial issue, and that directly affects you. It's not something you have real control over, but you have, it goes both ways. I know there was a suggestion on the money. The broker pays the carrier carrier pays the owner operator. Out of the pay that goes to the owner operator, in my opinion, the carrier is taking 8% of that. In other words, you have 100% of whatever you're getting paid. The carrier is taking your percent.
I disagree.
Whatever your agreement is. Go ahead.
Yeah, I disagree with that. I'll let you finish and then I'll come back to that.
Okay.
But go ahead.
No problem. The percent that they keep is the revenue that the truck earned through the carrier's contract with the broker. And I'm just using that. There's 100,000 different ways you can, get loads, direct customers and all that, but it's just spot market, the carrier, the owner operator. If the carrier is taking a piece of the revenue that was earned by the truck, and then they pay the truck, the way you stated a little earlier, I've only caught pieces of the show due to other issues going on, of that matter. I mean, if the truck didn't move the load in this particular situation, there wouldn't be a percent of the revenue earned for the carrier to keep.
Okay. I'm trying to figure out how to counter this because I completely agree with your idea that it's a partnership. I really do. Okay, so I'm not going to argue that point with you, but for the sake of to play devil's advocate a little bit and to understand a little bit more of the perspective of it, it's really no different if I was to lease you as an owner operator or if I was to go to Penske and lease a truck with a driver. What's the difference?
Well, if the Penske truck is booking the load and stuff, you are still keeping a percent of the revenue.
Well, hold on a second. Now,
by the truck that you're leasing to do.
They allow you to self-dispatch as an agent, as a benefit of, that's the agreement they have with you in that particular agreement, but only because they allow you to do that. Now, their payment terms, if it's a percentage wise or whatever, what they're saying is, there's other carriers out there that they just say, and there's nothing to say that I couldn't just tell you as an owner operator, if you lease to me and there's a load from point A to point B, I could just say, Ben, this load pays $1,000. Take it or leave it, right? You don't have to technically. I mean, I by law I have to show you all the documentation that goes with that load, but your revenue does not have to be tied to the revenue of that load. Now, your agreement with the carrier you are with does probably have that, and because that's kind of the general way that most owner-operator agreements are nowadays, is they move the freight running under somebody else's authority, and they get paid a percentage of that. There are still a lot of mileage contracts out there. There's still a lot of forced dispatch contracts out there. There is nothing in the laws that says that you couldn't be forced dispatched. A carrier that you lease to could do that because they essentially own your truck for the duration because they're your customer. Now, again, like I said, if it was Penske, the carrier lease to allows you to self-dispatch, but that's only a perk of, allowing you to have that freedom. But it's not in any way, shape, or form a requirement. So, if I leased a truck from Penske, I could dispatch that truck just like I dispatch your truck. That could be my agreement with you, is you come over here and I dispatch you wherever I need you. There are a lot of shippers, and one of my biggest direct customers and my original direct customers is a nursery out of Virginia. And every spring, when they have their big rush for the, get the plants to the farms and everything else, they hire on and they bring on owner operators to add capacity. They bring them on for about 6 weeks and then maybe 2 months, and then they let them go again because they just need that extra capacity. They do rent several trucks from Penske and Ryder, and they bring the guys out of their warehouse to go drive the trucks for that 6 weeks or 2 months, or they bring on owner operators, and the owner operators are not allowed to self-dispatch. The deal is, I'm going to pay you X amount per week, and you run these trailers wherever I need them to go, because it's really that they're just a customer. Now, in your situation, again, I agree with you. It's a partnership, but I just want you to think bigger than that. You could have 10 trucks, leased to 10 individual carriers. And if you did that, would you still consider yourself, partnered with each one of those, or would you kind of look at them more of a customer to your truck leasing company?
In my opinion, in my mindset of the guidelines that I am working in my contract, not grasping every which way with many different operations, I would say yes. I would see myself as a partner with each one of those businesses. Now, you're getting into something way bigger than what I am accustomed to thinking of and orientating myself in.
And
I'm not interested. I haven't studied multiple trucks. I'm just dealing with my one truck. And that's perfectly fine. I mean, even after you made some other points here, I see your point of view.
yeah.
And I think in our discussion, it was mostly, in my mind, I know what I'm talking about, my parameters
Right.
of what my discussion is and what my opinion is. And when you jump all over these other ones, I honestly do not have that experience or, along those lines.
And like I said, I agree with you that it's a partnership, and the whole concept here is just to kind of change your perspective to help you think a little bigger. If you drive the truck and you self-dispatch the truck, but if you stepped out of the truck and you hired a driver for it, would that change your relationship any? It would change your business and your relationship with that customer. If you had 5 trucks leased to that carrier, or you had 5 trucks leased to multiple carriers, or if the carrier you were leased to was just dispatching you, how would that change? Now, ultimately, all of this other stuff about how you can dispatch yourself and a percentage of the revenue and all that stuff, that's just paperwork. Ultimately, you own a business as an owner operator, and the carrier you are leased to is your customer because they write your check, and they can tell you what you can and can't do. Now, they already told you in your contract what you can and can't do, but they wrote that contract. You signed it to agree to what they said, but that's what they told you that their agreement was, right? So that's really, just to try to think a little bigger and thinking from different terms, because I know where you're coming from, but there are a lot of people that do think that they are an employee, so to speak, of that carrier, or they are tied to that carrier and they can't leave. One of the other points that came up in that was, well, a truck, leased to a carrier can't just leave because they have to, if that carrier forces them to get their own license plates, they'd have to go find another carrier that would allow them to get their own license plates. A carrier cannot force you to get your own license plate because you are an independent business owner. By law, they can't. Mercer, I just recently learned, Mercer just lost a huge lawsuit for that. And it cost them several $1 million. They used to try to force owner-operators to run the Mercer supplied tag, which they are not allowed to do. So you, as the business owner, an independent contractor, remember that's what you are, as an independent contractor. By definition, you run your own business and you have a partnership with this carrier you're leased to, but ultimately that they are your customer because you have, I don't know if you have any type of business cards or marketing plan or anything else to try to market your business, but who are you marketing to? Are you marketing to your carrier or are you marketing to the brokers as a representative of your carrier? That's what Anthony said. He represents Green Miles, and then you represent your carrier. So, and all of this, again, we all understand how the relationship works. We understand the flow of money. We understand what we have to do to get the job done and get that weekly settlement or whatever have you. All I'm trying to do is help people see this from a bigger view and a different perspective.
Well, there again, as we'll use your term, as the carrier being the owner-operator's customer, you do your check calls, you try to get your paperwork done right, you try to go out of your way to resolve issues if you can, and be communicative, all that,
right.
I would think would be basic stuff. To flip that, in your perspective, what would the carrier be doing to have the owner-operator as a service? Because, I mean, he's not just, the owner-operator is just not a truck or a truck available. I mean, he is doing all this extra stuff for the carrier, promoting the carrier's company name everywhere they go.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? I'm kind of at a loss.
Yeah. Oh, I see what you're saying. So the carrier, is paying you. The carrier is paying you to do those things. The carrier hired an outside company to do those things. That's what the carrier did.
Okay.
So now
All right,
go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was cutting
and so in your particular contract, it says that they pay you a percentage of the revenue, and that's that's based on how many do it, but that's not necessarily, that doesn't change the fact that the carrier is paying you for your services. Now, there's actually a lot of laws in how a carrier pays. Like a carrier must pay the owner operator before they can collect payment, in many cases, from the shipper or broker that they're working with. So a carrier by law an owner operator leased to a carrier by law must be paid within 15 days. Rarely does that money get collected by the carrier first. So the carrier is paying the owner operator out of money that they haven't collected yet. That carrier is paying, and in most cases, the carrier has to pay even if they can't collect. I believe that's even in the law too. It doesn't matter if the carrier cannot collect the money. That is irrelevant. They still have to pay the carrier for the work that they perform, the service that they provided for the carrier, because the agreement is between the carrier and the owner-operator.
Okay. As a way to justify that point of view, in the agreement that I'm with, there is a percent tacked on for factoring. Now, I mean, this changes the overall view of what we're discussing about. But